My name is Aller Whitman. I'm 26, and people often describe me as quiet, careful, someone who doesn't stir the waters. That morning, I was anything but calm. My phone buzzed at 6:30, the screen glowing with one word. Dad, get to the house now. His voice was sharp, leaving no space for questions. Before I could even respond, he hung up. The drive through Richmond was still wrapped in early fog, streets empty except for the occasional jogger. My hands clenched the steering wheel, a knot tightening in my stomach. I knew that tone. Something was waiting for me, and it wouldn't be good. When I stepped into the old Whitman house, the air felt heavy. Dad stood in the middle of the living room, arms folded tight across his chest. Mom lingered near the fireplace, her face unreadable, eyes darting anywhere but mine. On the couch, my younger sister Shannon lounged with a smirk tugging at her mouth, like she had been rehearsing for this moment. Dad's words landed like a blow. We're not funding the circus. The silence afterward pressed against my ears. My wedding, the day a Sunday Eric and I had been planning for months, was gone with one sentence. Shannon let out a little laugh. Better luck next time. I wanted to scream, to demand how they could erase everything without even asking me. Instead, my throat locked, my palms stung where my nails dug in. I forced my voice steady, flat, stripped of the storm inside. Understood. I turned, the scrape of my shoes against the wooden floor louder than anything else, and walked out the front door. Behind me, their eyes followed, but I didn't look back. The first boundary had been drawn. The morning air outside the house was damp and cool, but I felt hot under my skin as I drove back toward my apartment. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. Just 3 words. How did it go? I couldn't bring myself to answer yet. Images flickered in my mind. The hours we'd spent hunched over our kitchen table. Invitations spread out in neat stacks. Eric carefully addressing envelopes in his precise handwriting. The Ivy house was already reserved, its gardens the backdrop we had dreamed of. The florist had shown me swatches of ivory roses. The caterer promised lemon tarts, just like the ones Eric loved. All of it. Months of planning disappeared in the space of my father's command. He'd said it with such certainty, as if my happiness was a mistake he was correcting. We're protecting you, he told me once before when I tried to argue. Eric isn't ambitious enough. You need someone who can give you more than good intentions. My mother nodded in quiet agreement, lips pressed into a thin line. And Shannon, she never missed her cue, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Better luck next time." As if my life were a failed audition. Their words rang louder than the thud of my heart. It wasn't just about Eric or the wedding. It was about every choice they had taken from me. When I wanted to study design, they signed me up for accounting instead. When I showed interest in travel, they warned me it was reckless. Even the men I dated were dissected and dismissed, until I learned to stop introducing them altogether. By the time I reached my apartment, a strange calm had replaced the fury. Sitting alone on the couch, I realized the truth I had avoided for years. This fight wasn't about a single ceremony. It was about the life they believed they owned, and the one I was finally ready to claim for myself. I sat in my apartment. The silence, heavy enough to press against my chest. The wedding binder still lay open on the table, mocking me with its tabs and neat lists, every detail I had once cherished now hollow. I pushed it aside and walked to the closet, digging past boxes of tax files and old coats, until my hand brushed a worn leather spine. The sketchbook was thinner than I remembered, its edges frayed, the covers smudged with years of dust. I carried it to the couch, my fingers trembling as I flipped the first page. Dresses, sketched in pencil, some shaded with bursts of color, spilled across the paper, gowns with flowing hems, sharp-angled blazers, silhouettes that had once set my imagination alight. I had been 16 when I filled those pages, drawing late at night by the faint glow of a desk lamp, believing one day they would matter. I could still hear my mother's voice from that afternoon she found it. This nonsense stops now. She had plucked the sketchbook from my desk like it was contraband, her expression hard with disapproval. Dad stood behind her, arms folded, silent but firm. "You'll thank us one day, when you have a real career," he'd said. The next semester, I was enrolled in accounting classes, my sketchbook shoved into a drawer. Shannon had started dabbling in marketing around the same time, making colorful presentations that earned her applause at family dinners. "She's got flair," Mom would say, pride swelling in her voice. The contrast was sharp. Her creativity was celebrated, mine dismissed as childish fantasy. I turned another page, tracing the lines of a design I had once loved. A lump rose in my throat. It felt like touching a version of myself they had buried. The door opened, and Eric stepped in, his shoulders tired from a long day. His eyes fell on the sketchbook in my lap. "You kept them," he said softly. I nodded, unsure of what to say. He sat beside me, studying a drawing of a suit jacket. "Here, these aren't nonsense. Don't let them take this from you again." His words settled into me, steady and certain. For the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of the girl I had once been, still alive beneath the weight of their control. 2 mornings after finding the courage to reopen my sketchbook, I walked into an office that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Diane Cole's nameplate sat on the edge of her desk, polished and sharp, like the woman herself. She was brisk but not unkind, her gray suit pressed to perfection, her eyes cutting through me, as if she had already measured the weight of my story before I spoke. I slid the folder of papers across to her, the correspondence from the Ivy House. She opened it without hesitation, flipping pages with the kind of precision that told me she'd seen too many like them before. Then her hand stilled. She turned the cancellation form toward me and tapped the bottom line with her pen. "Is this your signature?" The question lodged in my throat. My name, sprawled across the page, written in ink that looked just familiar enough to unsettle me, but wrong enough to sting. The loops of the letters were heavy-handed, the flow unnatural, as though someone had studied my handwriting long enough to copy it poorly. "That's not mine," I said. My voice. Diane's expression tightened, though she didn't flinch. "I didn't think so. Whoever submitted this did so, pretending to be you. That's forgery, Ear. It's not only immoral, it's criminal." The words seemed to echo inside me. Forgery. My parents had always claimed their choices were about guidance, about love twisted into rules. But this was different. This wasn't protecting me from mistakes. This was theft of my voice, my consent, my future. I thought of Dad, standing stiff near the fireplace, arms folded in judgment. I remembered Mom's silence, her refusal to meet my eyes, and Shannon's mocking laugh. They hadn't even cared to hide it. They believed they could erase my wedding with the stroke of a pen, confident I would fall back into place. I pressed my hands to my knees to stop them from shaking. The betrayal dug deeper than any lecture or insult. This was them writing me out of my own life. Diane's voice steadied the air again. "You have options. We can challenge this. We can demand records and proof, but it will mean confronting them directly. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the forged signature one last time, anger pushing back against the hollow ache. My parents had gambled on my silence. They thought I would fold, like always. I lifted my chin, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. "Then we fight." That evening, I sat cross-legged on the couch, my sketchbook balanced on my lap, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Julia, a college friend who had always been plugged into Richmond's gossip mill. "Heard about Shannon's boutique. It's going under. She's drowning in debt. Suppliers, rent, everything. Thought you should know." The words blinked back at me, sharp as glass. My sister's glossy boutique, the one splashed across social media with ribbon-cutting photos and champagne flutes, was collapsing. I set the phone down, my pulse quickening. A memory rose of Mom's voice, only months earlier. "Shannon's our little entrepreneur. She's got flair." Her pride had been palpable, her eyes sparkling, as if Shannon's success belonged to all of us. Now, behind the curtain of polished Instagram posts, Shannon was buried in bills. And then the thought hit me with brutal clarity. Was this why my wedding had been canceled? Had my parents shredded the day Eric and I had planned, forged my name, just to funnel money into Shannon's sinking business? I remembered Dad that morning, his silence like a wall, his eyes fixed on the floor, while Mom spoke for both of them. Silence was always his way of agreeing without getting his hands dirty. Mom, of course, had defended Shannon every time, framing recklessness as confidence, mistakes as stepping stones. Shannon could skip classes, rack up expenses, even travel to Europe on their dime. And me, when I begged for design school, it was dismissed as childish fantasy. When I asked to study abroad, it was labeled irresponsible. The double standard was so familiar, it almost felt normal until now. I picked up the phone again, scrolling back through Julia's message. My chest tightened. I could hear Shannon smirk that day in the living room, her smug little dig. Better luck next time. She'd said it like she already knew I'd lost, like the punchline was hers alone. Had she been aware? Had she been part of it? The idea made my stomach twist. The anger that followed was different from the raw hurt I'd carried for years. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was rage at the realization that my wedding, my love, my dignity had been used as collateral to pay for Shannon's failures. I snapped the sketchbook shut, the sound cracking through the quiet apartment. For years, I had played the dutiful daughter, the safe one, the dependable one. They leaned on me, trusted I would never rebel, never walk away, and in return, they kept feeding Shannon's chaos, shielding her from the consequences she had earned. But now, the price was too high. My future wasn't theirs to trade. For the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than resignation. I felt the slow, steady burn of defiance. A week later, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I swiped to answer. Uncle Stephen's voice came through, low and deliberate. I need to tell you something. It's about your grandfather. I sat straighter, my heart thumping. Grandpa Whitman had been a distant figure, stern but kind in his quieter moments. He'd passed years ago, leaving behind stories and family photographs, but nothing I thought had to do with me. Stephen cleared his throat. Before he died, he set up a trust. $250,000. It was meant for you, specifically. The terms say it releases on your wedding day. I gripped the phone tighter. What? I checked the records, Stephen went on. Your parents have been managing it since his death, but instead of protecting it, they've been withdrawing. Vacations, renovations, and Shannon's boutique. Most of all, they've been siphoning money for years. My stomach dropped. In an instant, everything clicked into place. The forged cancellation, the smirk on Shannon's face, Dad's silence, Mom's cold certainty. They hadn't been protecting me from Eric. They hadn't been saving me from a so-called mistake. They were saving themselves. If I married, the trust would activate, the numbers exposed, their theft dragged into the light. I pressed my hand against my forehead, as if I could hold the anger in. My parents hadn't just controlled me. They had stolen from me, turning my grandfather's final gift into their personal lifeline. Stephen said gently. I thought you deserved the truth. I should have spoken sooner, but I wanted to be sure. My throat tightened. Thank you, I managed, though the word felt inadequate against the storm inside me. After the call ended, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my sketchbook. The pencil in my hand trembled. Every page I had once hidden now felt like a symbol of what they had buried. Not just my dreams, but my worth. The betrayal burned hotter than ever. They hadn't simply erased my wedding. They had gambled away my future, smiling in my face, while they robbed me blind. And they'd signed my name to it. The first call came from my mother. Her voice, usually sharp, wavered. We need to talk. The Ivy House won't refund the deposit. $25,000 gone. Please, just come home. We can figure this out together. Before I could answer, I heard my father in the background, low and urgent. Tell her we're sorry, Carol. The words slipped from her lips awkwardly, as though rehearsed. Shannon's voice chimed in, syrupy and false. Hey, sis, we messed up. Okay, just come back. We'll fix everything. I ended the call, my hands shaking. They weren't sorry. They were panicking over money. Apologies weren't a balm. They were currency. At Diane's office later that week, I laid the phone on her desk, like it carried poison. She scanned the newest documents, her expression tightening. We have a strong case, but Stephen's testimony will be attacked. They'll say he's biased, trying to stir family trouble. You need to be ready. There are no guarantees. The words drained me. I imagine sitting in a courtroom, my parents across from me, denying everything, dragging Stephen through the mud. My shoulders slumped. What if we just settle, take a partial payout, and end this? The thought slipped out before I could stop it. Diane studied me, her pen tapping lightly. That's your choice. But settling means they walk away with most of what's yours, and no one hears the truth. That night, I told Eric I was thinking of giving up. He listened quietly, then reached for my hands. His palms were warm, steady, grounding me. You're not alone in this, he said, his eyes unwavering. You've carried their weight long enough. Let me carry some of it now. The heaviness inside me shifted for the first time in weeks. His words didn't erase the fear, but they reminded me of something my parents could never cancel. I had someone who stood with me, no strings attached. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and paper, a place where secrets were stripped bare. I sat at the plaintiff's table, palms pressed together to stop the tremor in my hands. Across from me, my parents avoided my eyes, their lawyer whispering furiously in their ears. Shannon slouched in her chair, her lips twisted into a pout that bordered on boredom. Diane stood with calm precision. She presented the forged cancellation form, a handwriting expert testifying to the clumsy imitation of my signature. Then came the bank records, withdrawals linked to my parents, payments funneled into Shannon's boutique, receipts for vacations that now felt like salt in an open wound. When Shannon took the stand, her answers unraveled quickly. Each question about unpaid debts left her stammering until the judge cut her off, unimpressed. When the ruling came, it was swift. The trust fund was restored in full, damages ordered for fraud and forgery. Relief swept through me in a dizzying wave. Yet, grief knotted my chest as I looked at my parents, still stone-faced, their silence heavier than any protest. They didn't fight, didn't apologize, just sat there, unmoved, as though I had ceased to exist. Weeks later, sunlight spilled across the gardens of the Ivy House. The ceremony was simple, stripped of the excess they had once mocked. Eric's hand clasped mine, steady and sure. Uncle Stephen stood near the aisle, his quiet support a reminder of truth, while my cousin Owen made jokes that broke the tension and drew laughter from friends gathered close. I glanced at the empty seats where my family should have been. The ache was sharp, but not unbearable. I had chosen who stood beside me, and that choice was mine alone. That night, after the vows and the dancing, I sat with my laptop open and typed the words I'd been carrying for months. Carol, Robert, Shannon, this is goodbye. Don't contact me. I hit send, and the final thread snapped. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was freedom. The first voicemail arrived on a gray Monday morning. My father's voice, stripped of its old authority, trembled as he spoke. Please call us back. Things aren't good. I lost my job. The next message came from my mother. Her words brittle, each syllable edged with fatigue. She mentioned long hours at a retail store, as if humiliation could soften into sympathy. Shannon's messages were the loudest, swinging between desperate and cutting. Bankruptcy had swallowed her boutique whole, and now she wanted my help to get back on her feet. Day after day, the calls kept coming, sometimes 10 in a row, filling my phone like a drumbeat of the past, refusing to let go. I listened once, out of habit more than hope, but their words were hollow. They weren't reaching for me. They were reaching for money. I typed one message, steady and final. The circus is already full. Then I set the phone down and left it face down on the counter. The silence that followed was clean, almost merciful. Life had become something new. Eric and I bought a modest brick house in Richmond, shaded by tall oaks that dropped golden leaves onto our porch in the fall. The trust fund gave us stability, but what mattered more was the freedom to make choices without anyone signing my name for me. I enrolled in fashion design school, stepping into classrooms lined with bolts of fabric and mannequins, instead of ledgers and calculators. My old sketchbook now lived openly on the kitchen table, its worn pages joined by fresh sheets filled with new lines, new shapes, new beginnings. Sometimes, the ache of family returned, sharp as a bruise pressed too hard. But when Eric leaned over my shoulder, laughing at a crooked sketch or bringing me coffee during late nights, I felt the ache ease. Family wasn't who canceled my wedding. Family was who showed up to help me build a life worth keeping.